My job over here is to be a provocateur. Again, and the metaphor that I like is a pinprick or pebbles in your shoe disturb the equilibrium. Why? Because when you're flipping through a set of papers and suddenly a pin pricks your finger, what do? You snatch it and you look at it and you say, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm going to do. A few pin pricks here and there, and you say, okay, let me think about it a little more. Or put a few pebbles in your shoe so that when you're walking and you have a pebble in your shoe, you don't feel very comfortable. You take off your shoe and say, let me take a look at this. So all that I'm trying to do is to try to get you to examine, and I'm actually very pleased to see the number of hands that went up in terms of how you have experimented with collaboration and co-creation. So with that kind of preface, and one more thing. I am not going to be doing customer-consumer. In the interest of time and simplicity, I'm only going to refer to in a generic way as customer so that we can understand that this has both B2B and B2C applications. Okay? All right. Let's first set the stage. About 200 years ago, the other William wrote a beautiful poem called "The World is Too Much with Us." And those of you who have an interest in literature, I'd like to read to you the second line. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. And I think you've heard a lot about that today as to how sometimes we don't achieve our potential. I've sent a lot of emails to William asking him that why did he feel that the world was too much with us? And I get an out-of-office reply saying, I'm traveling, my heart is leaping up as I behold rainbows. I'm like a cloud floating over dale and listing in search of daffodil fields. So he's obviously out somewhere over there, trying to sort of get one with the world. Now, the same William, if he was living with us today, would be equally flummoxed. So this whole idea of being boxed in by the world, of being sort of, experiencing a sensory overload is not a new phenomenon. It at least goes back 200 years. And if there are any Hollywood types over here in the room and you want to make a movie on management thinking, Fast and Furious 2011, please don't forget my contribution and my rights and royalty payments. But the fact of the matter is that we've got all these things, absolutely crowding us in. But mercifully, the good Lord above gave us something called selective perception. So what do? We see what we want to see, we hear what we want to hear, and the rest of it, we just forget. I'm going to be proceeding with the demystifying, as I like to call it, collaboration and co-creation. And by that, what I'm going to do are four things, really. First of all, I'm going to reveal the full dimensionality so we see the total iceberg. We're going to pay homage to a lot of gods. I come from a country where there are at least 101 incarnations of God. So we do have a lot of gods that we can pay homage to, okay? The second thing is we're going to go backstage. It's one thing to go to the MGM Grand and see the Cirque du Soleil. It's another thing to go backstage and see how they really prepare and how they actually synchronize their movements and all that good kind of stuff. So we're going to go backstage and take a look at how some of the other organizations do it. We're going to articulate the how, because what you're asking right now is, see, not all of you raised your hands. A good portion of you raised your hands, but what about the others? This is for you also. Collaboration and co-creation is for you also. So you're asking the question, how do I do it? How do I get involved in the act? And how do I also become like all these other people? So we'll address that. And when the train is entering the station, you must have heard the announcement, mind the gap, okay, between the train and the platform. When you actually look at that gap, it has to be a very bulimic individual that can actually go through it. Okay, but still they keep saying, mind the gap between the station and the train and the platform. So I'm going to give you a few cautionary mind the gaps so that you don't fall through that crevice, okay? If you're really looking for a good read, I highly recommend to you the book, The Professor and the Madman. It's written by Simon Winchester. It is a brilliant book on the making of the Oxford English Dictionary. Here's the deal. The professor was Professor James Murray, a man of letters, 1857 in damp, dark, foggy London, okay? And he was listening to this cry where people were saying, we really need a good dictionary. We don't have a good dictionary for the English language. And what were all the other pundits saying? Oh, don't worry about it. You don't need it. But James Murray was built differently. He said, we really need to build this dictionary. Now, who wrote the Oxford English Dictionary? Think about it. But before you answer, let me just warn you, it's a trick question, okay? Think about it. How many volumes, how many hundreds and thousands of words could one person possibly have written the Oxford English Dictionary? No. Absolutely not. And thank you. You know that I'm blind, so I can hear. So when I do this, I'm making sure that people are in the room. Okay? Absolutely not. Who wrote the Oxford English Dictionary? People like you and I. So what James Murray did was he put together an organization, and look at the steps that they went through. First, identifying over 300 books, procuring enough copies of that, sending out an appeal to the English-speaking world, and at that time, the English-speaking world was what? England? Ireland? Yes, they do speak English over there sometimes, okay? There was USA, there was Canada, there was India on the other side, Singapore, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Australia, okay, Malaysia. So there were a handful of countries that spoke English at that time, identifying people like you and I who were willing to read it, and then putting up with their nonsense, like every time I encounter the word "and," do I treat it as a different word? Okay, you know, so, and they went through this 70 years in the making, 10 volumes. James Murray was long dead by the time the Oxford English Dictionary came out. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're not impressed, please understand, all this happened before the advent of the internet and email and instant communication that you've got so used to now. Okay, the single biggest contributor in that whole thing was a certain gentleman by the name of Dr. W.C. Minor. He was an American. And he was actually a medical doctor. Okay, why was he called the madman? I'm not going to spoil your reading fun. But you should take a look at it, because it'll give you a whole new appreciation for what really goes on when you have mass-scale collaboration and co-creation. There's an old saying, that, or the American Express, remember, don't leave home without it. Do not underestimate the value of your employees. I blogged about this, and MasterCard, which is a recent newcomer to the collaboration and co-creation game, yes, they were the slogans. The CEO made some nice statements and all, but the most important thing is they invested in MasterCard Labs, and they first started with innovating with their employees, saying, innovating for customers, but with our employees first. Why? Because the frontline people come across a lot of angst, and wherever there's angst, there's an opportunity. And it has a huge energizing and transformation effect on the organization. And lastly, very often I get this question, but is it for me? Is it only for the Hershey's and the Nestle's and the P&G's and the Unilevers and the Nikes of the world? Yes, collaboration and co-creation is for you. As a matter of fact, the single largest growth area in collaboration and co-creation is in the government sectors, is in the non-profit sectors, is in areas like education and water and intelligent transportation. Anybody from DARPA over here? Anybody from DARPA? Anybody from any government organizations in the room? I don't think so. Department of Education, Department of Energy, okay? The DARPA wanted to co-create the next generation of military vehicle. If they had gone through their standard procurement procedures, it would have taken them 7 years. They instead collaborated with Local Motors, and that prototype was built in how many weeks? 16 weeks. 8 weeks for the design, 8 weeks for co-creation, and there was a winner, by the way. President Obama unveiled this at the at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and he called it the future of manufacturing in America. Whether or not it will be, we'll see. So, in summary, please, okay, have serious intent. You must want to listen, engage, and respond to your customers if you want to be successful in collaboration and co-creation programs. You must be willing to take a back seat. Collaboration and co-creation is a formal business process. There is nothing wrong with the word structure. It's not a bad word, okay? Have an investment mindset, because if you're not going to invest, you know, how are you going to make it happen for the customers? Don't underestimate the innovation potential of your employees. Don't leave home without them. And finally, yes, it's for you too. It's not just for a selected few. And with that, I'd like to wish all of you, oh yeah, one more thing. Check and recheck your assumptions constantly. Don't make dangerous assumptions about the willingness and the ability of people to contribute to your programs. And if you do all this, I'm pretty sure that all of you will have some very happy co-creation. If you want to make innovation your #1 priority, then how do you go about doing it? The traditional way is what? Company-centric, R&D focused. I'm going to do everything myself. So if I want to be the most innovative company, what do? I go to the best business schools, right? I hire the brightest and the smartest people. I have a large pool of investable resources for getting talent, and I do it myself. That's the old-fashioned way. The new way is more ecosystem-centric, which says there is not a single company that is rich enough, that is smart enough to do it on their own. I'm going to first talk about the need to rethink marketing, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. We will then talk about the need to rethink innovation. Okay? Then I will share with you the implications that those have for business strategy and business thinking. I will also share with you the implications that that has for society. And then I will leave you with a couple of provocations for a new mindset. Customers don't buy quarter-inch drills, they buy quarter-inch holes. Yes, it is true that in order to drill a quarter-inch hole, I need a drill. But that's not the reason why I shake hands with a company. That's not the reason why I do business with you. I do business with you because I have certain problems that I need to solve. I am looking for certain solutions. I am looking for certain means to certain ends. And if you can provide them, I will do business with you. Half a century later, we're still struggling with how can we become more customer-centric. The only job of a business, he said, was to get hold of a customer and keep the customer. Is customer acquisition a big word today in businesses? Yeah. Or big phrase? Yes. Is customer loyalty a big phrase? Yes. Yeah. It's not new. People have been saying it for lots and lots of years. So isn't that a paradox? And as Bertrand Russell said, paradoxes contain insight. So if on the one hand, you've had people been exhorting you to go out there, get the customer, hang on to the customer. Now, what did we say? Why does the customer shake hands with you? Because you offer something of value. Okay? And the only way you can hang on to your customer is by continuing to provide value. And the only way that you can prevent that value black hole from occurring is by investing in innovation. Selling has only one preoccupation, correct? Yeah. Rokda. For whom? For the seller, correct? Is that what marketing is? Is that what marketing should be? Okay? So, in this new mindset that I'm trying to get you to cultivate, to develop, okay, where you're trying to make innovation your number one priority, if you're overly obsessed with sales, if you're overly obsessed with advertising, if you're overly obsessed with your brands and your factories and your processes, you may actually lose customers because why? You may become insensitive to the value black holes. You may never even recognize that the market has shifted from under your feet. You can get caught cold. Has it happened? Who was the number one leader in photography for a long, long time? Kodak. Where is Kodak today? In my opinion, marketing is not a department, it's not a function, it's an obsession. And it's an organization-wide obsession. With what? With one and only one thing. And what is that? Creating, delivering, nurturing, sustaining, innovating customer value. Why? Because if I can do that, I know I will have a customer today. And I know I will have a customer tomorrow. And I know I will have a customer day after tomorrow. The IBM of today looks nothing like the IBM of 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. The Xerox of 5 years from now is going to look like nothing of the Xerox of 10 years ago. Why? Because the market is changing, they are changing. Because they are in the business not of making copiers, but of creating customer value. They are a technology company, but not linked to a finite product or a service. They are linked to a certain solution space that they feel that they can